Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be doing the reading for the sermon today from my phone, and this is taken from Genesis chapter 1. In the 26th verse, God says, "I shall make mankind in my own image and in my own likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. So I want to talk to you this morning about creation. Many of you will remember that when I was traveling in Guatemala in December, and I came back and I offered a class on what is the purpose of life. And I discussed the idea that human beings are given something that distinguishes them from the animals, and that is the ability to create. In many churches, they discuss the idea that when God says man shall be made in his own image, that people think then that God looks like man. In reality, what we teach in the mystical path is that what God is saying is that God has given humanity the potential, the ability, the tools necessary to create. And this is something that distinguishes human beings from the other forms of animal life. I would like you to be able to create with great proficiency, with great efficiency. I would like you to be able to utilize the potential that you are given to create a life that is meaningful to you, that is joyful, that is abundant, that is free. In order to do so, I want to give you a few analogies. I think all of us are confident, because we experience the fact that we have a physical flesh body, we have a mind, we have a emotional or feeling system. In other words, we are able to feel, which is different than thinking. There is a sensory experience. And these are components or tools that are given to us as a soul. The soul is a mysterious thing. It's something that we can explore and get to know. But in the beginning, before we really have the experience of knowing the soul, we have more of a knowing of the tools of the soul, the mind, the emotions, feelings, the physical body. Now, if you were to do no development, let's say, for example, that you were to not put any attention to your physical body, and that you ate all the foods that are fabricated now that have no real nutritional value, they're designed to stimulate certain taste sensations. There's no concern for physical health through utilizing of your body, through tending to it, through proper sleep, through proper hydration, etc. Over time, your physical body will begin to lose its ability to mend itself, because it's not being taken care of. The same thing occurs with your mind, that if you allow your mind to continually be cluttered with negativity, with obsessive thoughts, with fears, with anxieties, with thoughts against your fellow human being, with thoughts of self-loathing because you weren't able to achieve this, or you weren't able to manifest that, or you didn't know what you were supposed to do, the mind begins to take on a certain tonality. And so your being doesn't function at the level that it can. Same thing occurs with the emotional system. That if you do not attend to your emotional system, meaning you do not spend time in meditation, explore what you have felt, give it time, give it space to breathe, make decisions based on what you feel, then in time, your emotional system sort of becomes an enemy within you. And what people do is they strive to get away from their emotions. or in certain case scenarios they become depressed. The pressure of their own emotions is so extreme that all movement ceases, the movement energy ceases. So thinking about it in these terms, I think you can relate. You can explore, okay, to what degree do I attend to my body? Am I cautious about how much I eat? Am I cautious about if I use my body for the purposes of exercise? Do I use my body for the purposes of joy? Nothing wrong with being sexual, but an overemphasis on being sexual, that leads to an imbalance. With the mind and the emotions, do I practice meditation? Do I develop the disciplines necessary? Do I allow my mind to run off into these certain negative ways of thinking for long periods of time? Or do I essentially seize my mind by the reins and say, I am the soul here, and therefore you will obey what I want? So many of you have heard this sort of preaching before. It really is the basis of learning meditation, which is to begin to recognize these tools that you are given. Now let's jump to the next level. Let's think about what are the tools of creation. And am I doing anything to develop the tools of creation that I have been given? Well, the soul is you might say, the foundation of the ability to create. The soul is that which distinguishes us from the other animals. That we have this capability to reflect upon ourselves, to think about things that we want, and then to use the tools that we are given to manifest them. A while ago I heard that the term man is a shortened version of manifestation, which I thought was pretty cool. So manifestation is really the essence of what we are here to do. We are here to create with the life that we have, to create a life that is meaningful. Now, within that context, what we teach here is that we're looking to also create a life that is pleasing to God, that is harmonious to the divinity within us. A very interesting thing about the passage that we heard today in Genesis is that it says God made them male and female. And this is what's been coming up for me in my meditation. The reality is that creation always requires input of the male and the female forces. Now, human being contains both. We can pretty clearly say that the mind is a masculine force. We can also pretty clearly say that the heart is a feminine force. Meaning, the act of thinking should be thought of as masculine, and the act of feeling should be thought of as feminine. When the thinking function and the feeling function work in harmony together, we have a nice balance of those masculine and feminine forces. You may wonder, well, what about the physical body? Is the physical body masculine or feminine? It depends on what you are. If you're a man, your physical body is going to be masculine. If you're a woman, your physical body is going to be feminine. If you have a male body, then you will tend to be a little bit stacked, you might say, on the masculine energy. And therefore, you'll probably have to work a little harder to develop the feminine within you. And the same thing applies if you have a female physical body, that you will have to work a little bit harder to develop the masculine in you in order that these forces would come into a certain balance. We have a beautiful example of the masculine and feminine working in harmony to create when a child is conceived. And if you follow the process, you will see that the process is the model for how we are to create in all aspects of our lives. That generally creation begins with a desire. That's an aspect of the feminine. There is something within the being that is desired or that is wanted. It is the female in the relationship that has the stronger desire to conceive of the child. And that may simply be because her physical body is set up to carry the child, to bear the child. And so there is a certain instinctual drive to want to fulfill that potential. So it is the feminine in us that has a certain desire. And you could imagine that the desire is now presented. How does this exactly happen? Well, you'll have to sort of study yourself. But the desire is presented within the being, and it requires the input of the masculine. So we see that in the act of conception, that the masculine body enters the female body, and there is a moment of fecundation. There is something given from the masculine, received by the feminine, and this begins a process where something is being built. The female body has the potential, not by use of mind, not even by use of heart, by some mysterious creative force that exists within the feminine body. The physical body of another human being is created. Now, what's really interesting and cool is that the physical body of this child is created within the feminine body in the dark, in a mysterious, unseeable way. And when a woman first becomes pregnant, most cases, they don't know it right away. There are some people who are that sensitive that they can sense the immediate moment at which conception occurs. However, for most women, they require some sort of a test, and eventually their body begins to send signals to them. Maybe it's the creation or the production of different hormones that creates an imbalance in their moods. There's morning sickness. There's cravings for certain types of food. In other words, there's signs that the body gives that something is happening. Now let me veer off for a moment and talk about when you seek to create something in your life that you want to do by yourself, that is not involving the conception and the act of sexuality and all that. You have to consider that the creative process will begin with a desire. There is something that you want, and that is healthy. Be careful of these religions that teach that desire leads to suffering. Desire is a God-given trait that sparks the act of creation. It is the attachment to specific desires manifesting in a specific way at a specific time that will have the tendency to lead to this attachment and suffering. However, the pure essence of desire is the beginning of creation. Now, you might then sit in meditation and go, I have this desire for something. There's something that I want. And you'll recognize that your mind will typically kick in and begin to contemplate, mull over, think about, reflect, analyze. And this is the masculine that is going, well, let's think about this. Let's think about if this is going to be good for us. Let's think about how we might go about creating it. Let's really be clear about the process to get from here to there. And the feminine within us is receptive. And this is really important. Because if the feminine within us is just so married to our desire that does not allow for the masculine its input, we begin that process of things becoming imbalanced. You know, an example might be you have such a strong feeling for something that you don't want to think about it, you don't want to analyze it, you don't want to contemplate if it's actually good for you. And you just try to coerce your mind into proceeding with it. You see this sometimes in relationships too, where one person is so utterly convinced of something that they want that they don't honor the other person's input. And if the other person does not have a very strong or developed will, or is living a certain level of fear that it may cost them the relationship, then they may give over, and it feels somehow that it goes against what they know is true. There is a desire for that relationship to continue, such that the individual is willing to sacrifice their own integrity in order to not lose the relationship. So as we discuss the act of creation, you can see there's many pitfalls along the way where you potentially can sacrifice the necessary components of good, healthy, balanced creation if there are certain imbalances. What we want to do here is we want to gain proficiency over the process of creation. If you want to be proficient in a certain sport, you got to work your body. You got to develop the strategy. If you want to become proficient in relating to other people, you're going to have some emotional intelligence. If you want to become proficient in running a business, you're going to have to understand the laws of supply and demand and how to market yourself and how to price yourself and how to essentially deliver a service that people will pay for. If you want to become proficient at creation, you have to recognize not only the presence, but the role of the masculine and feminine components within you. So continuing along in the metaphor, eventually it becomes evident that the child is becoming a real thing because the size of the woman's abdomen or the uterus, or I'm not exactly sure how it all works, is revealing that there's something going on. The feminine really has to kick in and nurture what is going on, has to be aware of it, and has to change their lifestyle to a certain degree to accommodate this budding creation. And there comes a day when the child is born. At various steps along the way, there's communication between the masculine and the feminine. For example, the feminine says, well, I must create a certain nurturing environment here for this child to be born. I have to stop certain activities. I have to eat different foods. I have to essentially create an environment where this child can be nurtured and where this child can grow healthily in order that it may be born. So there's constant back and forth between those desires to create that environment and the masculine, which is the one that is meant to implement them, who needs to think about and contemplate and how do I go about this and what should I do and what should I not do. And a very beautiful component of the masculine is the ability to decide. Strong masculine always includes decisiveness, and in that decisiveness there needs to be confidence. The confidence comes because there is a feeling that is born of the decision. So if you go to make a decision and you don't check back with your feelings and go, does this feel right? Then you may not have the confidence in your decision. And if you were never taught to do that, you may not even know, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to sit there and contemplate and then receive my feelings and then explore my options and make a decision about what to do. And then once I've made that decision, or present the various options back to my feelings in meditation and go, which of these feels best, feels right? And together the masculine and the feminine are in communication. Eventually, the child is born, the creation is now manifest, and the masculine and the feminine within the couple, within each individual, are ignited to take care of this child. This is the child that they have created together, and now they must nurture it, and they must love it, and they must teach it, and et cetera, et cetera. Whatever it is that you want in your life, I would like you to reflect on this process. I would like you to remember the necessity for the masculine and the feminine to be involved in order for the creation to be divinely blessed. That you have to honor that God made human beings masculine and feminine. The final level of this teaching that I want to discuss today has to do with when you reach a place where you recognize that soul and God within is another expression of the masculine and feminine. The soul in every human is feminine. The Christ within every human is masculine. Now we know that within the soul we have the mind, the body, the emotional system. So there's masculine and feminine components within the soul. And of course, the Christ within, the perfect expression of the God self, has full knowledge and understanding and comprehension of the masculine and feminine. So the perfect elements of each are contained within the God self or the Christ and in the soul. But now that we have perfected, or at least attempted to perfect within our own soul, the expressions of masculine and feminine in order to create in our lives, we now take it to the next level where we as soul are the feminine and the Christ within is the masculine. And we begin to form this relationship with the desire to create a life that is an expression of these two very high parts, the soul and the self. And if you can imagine the way we just discussed, how the mind and the heart go back and forth, the soul in you, the feminine, begins with the desire, that you have the right to determine what you desire in life, that God created that way, and that we then turn within, in meditation, to the self, to the Christ, and say, I have a desire for this. I want this. How might we go about? How might we proceed? So this is a real sort of a debunking of the idea that God is going to dictate a will for your life. The masculine is the component that brings will. There is a willfulness in, I will do this, I will execute upon this, I will implement upon this, I will not do this, I will not do that. So the masculine, with the confident decision making, is the one that has to implement and has to sometimes overcome the inertia of slothfulness or greediness or fear or whatnot, and it has to will itself to take action. So God's will is a real thing. But God's will is not about superimposing God's desire onto you. You, as the soul, choose the desire. And you bring the desire to the God self. And you allow the God self, the Christ within you, to bring about, to, in a sense, fecundate that desire. As though it's impregnating it brings forth this seed of mystery in order to fecundate that egg of desire. And so begins the process of creation. Something happens as a result of that. A spark occurs. And you feel that as a spark of maybe intuition or some sense of an energy brewing, an excitement. And you take that into meditation and you begin to contemplate, okay, so God, how would we do this? What is the first steps? And your mind gets involved and your heart gets excited and you recognize that the process is occurring. Feminine soul with masculine Christ. And you have to create that environment of receptivity. There has to be a nurturing element to yourself as the creation is beginning to take hold. And remember, you may not always be able to see if anything is happening. Just like when the child is being formed, we don't see it. And for sometimes a couple of months, we're not even aware that it's happening. And people can become frustrated, like, oh, I don't think my thing is working out, and woe is me, and it never goes the way I want. It may actually be going the way you want. However, you can't see it yet. So there's that element of faith that God has fecundated my desire. And as long as I stay true and I continue to nurture the desire, the creation, I see the creation already formed, and I move forward, continually checking in with the forces of the masculine and the feminine presence within me to not give up, to not let the depression of my emotional disappointment or fear stop all the movement of the energy. So it's a lot, yeah. And if you don't spend any time developing the skills, then don't blame God for not answering your prayers. We have the responsibility to develop the tools in order to become masters of creation. So as you go about your week, notice. Try to notice when the exertion of masculine or feminine is more prominent and go, am I aware of it? Am I honoring it? Am I also keeping that masculine presence in a positive, healthy mindset? In other words, am I allowing myself to think in a way that God would be pleased by? And if I have a desire, is that desire driven by fear or anxiety or ego? And if it is, I don't want to bring that potential egg of desire to the self and ask the self to fecundate something that is not good for me. So a human being needs to discern at many steps along the way if my masculine forces are working in harmony with God. Are my feminine forces working in harmony with God? And am I developing them? Am I really able to and practice creating a nurturing environment that is patient, that is giving, that is generous, that is receptive? Am I practicing making sure that my mind is becoming more proficient in making decisions and good decisions and checking back with my feelings that I'm confident in my decisions? And am I actually on the path where I'm looking to be a soul in relationship with the Christ within? And you will find then that the mystery of manifestation will be revealed to you, and you will become a master of creation.